My thought in thinking about culture and settlement is that we need to get beyond the top of what I've described as an iceberg in my book and in lots of my presentations. The food, the songs, and many times if you read articles about how to have a good program for immigrants or for people from other cultures, they'll talk about, lots of pictures of costumes, lots of different foods, lots of holidays. And that's fine, but I don't really think that hits at what culture really means. What it really means is, how does a child feel in a group? How does a child feel about competition? How does a child feel about gold stars? What if they go home and say they were centered out when mom says, like my mother did, self-praise is no recommendation? We have to think a little bit, I think, maybe more than is present now. We have to think about, what do these things mean for the way children negotiate their lives and for that transformation that we just talked about in terms of the butterfly. And in fact, I used the word transformation a minute ago, but the other word that I have used for settlement is, in addition to being change, it's also transition. And there's someone called William Bridges, whose work is very good, who has described transition in terms of 3 phases. The first one is change, and the last one is a new beginning. But the middle one is neutral. Now, he was writing originally about an experience in his own life, not about newcomers. But it seems to me that the way he describes the neutral zone as being a time of upset, confusion, that's really what we're all faced with when we try to work with programs that are settling newcomers. It's not a good idea to think about them as being, they're just settled, that this is their routine, this is the normal way they do things, because they're not at that point yet. They're in the middle of a transformation, and it's part of our job as people who are providing support and encouragement to understand that that is what they're involved in. Now, in 2010, when I wrote the first book, I came up with a definition of settlement, and I have no reason to change it since. I've been talking about it, and it seems to me that maybe there are some points here that are worth thinking about. Feeling welcome, having needs met, and having a balance between the old and the new. So I'm not suggesting that throw out all the old, tack on all the new. I'm suggesting that we need to work, transform, transition, to find that balance so that people can participate comfortably in social settings. And that doesn't necessarily mean that the only people who change are the newcomers. Maybe we have something to learn from the way that other people do things. And it's important for us to recognize that. So, having introduced the topic of settlement, it may be time to turn to child needs. What are the needs of children? And first of all, why are they being missed? This surprised me when I did the work. I found out that the census figures start at age 15. It's very difficult to find out information about populations under 15. And children who are born, I have to hurry. Young children are often considered a 1.5 generation. Not children born here, but not as newcomers. If you know anything about epigenetics, you know the gene is expressed based on experience. A newcomer from a refugee camp's experience is really different from a newcomer who was born in suburbia. So there's those research practices, there's ideas about children and whether they have rights, and there's ideas about whether children bounce back. Now, the other observation I have is that we need to think, I think, about the needs of the child. Very often parents are not, so I put the child needs at the top with the parent and provider below. And I do that because in many of the case studies I read, parents did not move forward with settlement activity except when they knew it was for their children, and then they would learn language, etc. Moving on, we see that they have a range of needs, all the way from, on the one hand, to simple settlement and culture, to a disability or diagnosis. And the thing about this diagram is the needs the child is in caps, so it's a little bit more important, but the child, the parent, and the teacher, all the people involved have needs. So it's a really big, complicated situation. This is not easy. I'm not trying to say that it's easy. So there's a range of needs in terms of severity, and this slide just illustrates that on this, something like eye contact, a child may not make eye contact. That may be because they're involved in settlement. In the middle, it might be trauma. Both of those are things that can be resolved. But what if it's autism? And I've experienced this in programs, and when you read the literature, even the most accomplished medical people can barely tell the difference. So I think that people who work with children on a daily basis need to be sensitive to the fact that there is a range, and sometimes it may be all three at one time. The other kind of need is a variety of needs, and I knew that I would not be able to talk about these in detail, but some of these were mentioned in the video and also mentioned by Monica. What I would like, so I've organized them into 4 areas, and the 2 that I plan to say something about were down here in coping and social awareness. Coping means, the ideas behind coping are, we hear that in childcare you are taught to, if mom does it this way, you do it this way at the childcare center. What if you teach the child to be resilient? So if you do it this way at the childcare center and this way at home, it's perfectly okay. And that, I think, builds strength and stamina for moving into the larger society. My comment about school readiness is that, you know, all children need to be ready for school, but what does school readiness look like for a newcomer child? If you want to go on then to you can pass that one. And readiness is like settlement. It's got the same sort of shape. And we all know, I mean, one of the reasons I first started to do this in terms of readiness was because so much was written about the issues that families face when children start out for school. It's one of the topics that has a lot of literature that you can apply to the newcomer situation. In Canada, but in Ontario particularly, the EDI is used, and I'm going to assume that everybody here knows that about the EDI that is administered to kindergarten children across the province on a cyclic basis, so that in essence all the children across the province have it. It's done in all provinces in Canada, and it's done in Australia. There are 5 domains of readiness, and if you notice the bottom one, number 5, is slightly tinted, and you see that the scores there are lower than the scores in the other domains. I think communication and general knowledge is a good symbol or indicator of settlement. If you look up what the authors of the study or the instrument, how they describe communication and general knowledge, it strikes me that settlement and particularly general knowledge are similar things. The scores in British Columbia are so low that they don't include them when they make a means, try to find what's the mean score. So what would happen if we spent a little bit more time on the settlement of young children and not quite so much time on maybe academic kinds of things? So this is my last slide, Patricia, so I'm doing okay, I hope. The last thing I'll say is that readiness in all the definitions is not something that resides only in the child. It's not the fault of the child only if the child is not ready. It's the school and the community also has responsibility. So here are 10 quality benchmarks that I extracted from research in child development from the United States mostly, but some from Canada. Here's the top 10, particularly the ones identified in red. Ask children's opinions, choices, etc. Those are not things that a newcomer child can do easily. So our ideas about quality, I'm not sure those are everybody's ideas about quality anyway, but our ideas about quality may not be the kinds of ideas that are going to lead to quality programming for newcomer children. And I think that by focusing on settlement, you can provide children with a foundation that helps them move forward and maybe makes them into, as I said, more like butterflies.